Well, welcome back to coverage of the materials. We're in our book, Real Estate Law for Paralegals, and talking about Chapter 1, an introduction to real property law. This is Part 3, where we're going to learn about our bundle of rights. So we learned in Part 1 what property was, that it's about the rights that we have in those items. That is what we own. We looked at the different characteristics of property and learned what fixtures were. In part 2, we looked at acquiring ownership or title to real property and a couple of different ways to do that. Got introduced to a few terms, those specifically grantor, grantee. Told you those are real important. And so now we're going to learn a little bit more about the rights that we have, the ownership rights. And we call these ownership rights the bundle of rights. So what does it mean when we talk about the bundle of rights? Well, when we say the bundle, it's the concept of all of the ownership rights in property, and we bundle them all up. But really, they are individual rights in property. So the first one is right of disposition. We also have the right of use and enjoyment. We have a right of possession and a right of exclusion or control. So each one of these is an individual right. So we think of it as its own individual stick. And if we pick up all the sticks or pick up all the rights, we end up with a bundle. And so that's why we call it the bundle of rights. And this is the stuff they teach you in law school, and they teach it just like that, telling you that each right is a stick, and if you pick them all up, you have a bundle. So you just got a law school education for the paralegal degree price. So now we're going to look at each one of these rights individually. So the first one we're going to look at is the right of disposition. So this is the right to transfer your ownership interest in the property or a portion of it during your lifetime or at death. So let's say we have Old Man Jones, and he has a little cottage. He also has a deadbeat son that would rather fish and drink beer than get a job. And he has a grandson, little Johnny, that he loves. Well, Old Man Jones has a right to dispose of this property any way he sees fit. And he would love for little Johnny to get the property and not give it to his deadbeat son. Now he can do this. He has this right to give it away or dispose of the property during his lifetime or at death. So remember when we talked in part 2, we learned about a gift or devise and intestacy. And I told you those things were important, they would carry forward. So if Old Man Jones wants to dispose of his property during life, he can give it as a gift to little Johnny, and that way he makes sure little Johnny gets it and his son does not. And remember I told you about these two terms, grantor, grantee. The grantor being the person who's transferring ownership of the property, and the grantee being the person who is receiving ownership of property. I told you these terms are important. You need to get comfortable with them. You'll see them over and over again. So if he wanted to give it to him during life, he would give it to him as a gift. And if he didn't want to give it to him during his lifetime, he could give it to him upon his death. And he would do that by putting it in his will. So he has the right to dispose of the property to little Johnny at death through the will or during life as a gift. But if Old Man Jones doesn't give it to little Johnny during his lifetime as a gift. And let's say Old Man Jones doesn't have a will where he elects who gets his property at death. Well, then he dies intestacy, and that right of disposition sort of goes away because Old Man Jones doesn't get to pick who gets his property because he didn't do it in his will. And so it passes pursuant to state statute that we looked at, right, intestacy. And so his deadbeat son will likely end up getting the ownership of that property, or at least a portion of it. So the right of disposition is a significant right, but you have to protect it, right? And if you want to choose who gets your property at your death, then certainly you should have a will. Otherwise, it passes statute and you have no control over that. So the next right is a right of use and enjoyment. This is the right to use your property or permit others to use your property in any lawful manner. So if you want to use your property for a single family home, you can do that. If you own a bigger parcel of land, let's say downtown, and want to turn it into an apartment complex, you can do that. Or if you own some land out over by the freeway and you want to build a strip center, shopping center, it's your right to use your property the way you see fit. You might own some land out in a rural area and want to use it as a farm. Then again, you might want to use it as a pig farm. It's your property and you have the right to use it the way you want. You might even choose to use it as a toxic waste dump. It's your property. You should be able to use it the way you want. You may just want to use it for a good night's sleep. Then again, you may want to use it to party every night. It's your property. You should be able to use and enjoy it the way you want. That's your right. So our next right is of possession. So we talk about the right of possession. Are we talking about the right to have your body taken over by an unholy spirit and spew vomit all over the place? No. We're talking about the ability to walk around with a bunch of narcotics in your pockets? No. When we talk about the right of possession, we're talking about the right to occupy the property in privacy or exclusivity, right? This is what we're talking about when we're talking about possession. Your book defines possession as having control over a thing with the intent to have and to exercise such control. But property is different than personal. Real property is different than personal property because personal property or real property you can't pick up. You know, you can't stick real property in your pocket. You can't wear real property around your neck. You can't hide real property in a cave, right? So real property, the way we possess real property is by putting up fences to keep other people out, or maybe signs that tell others to go away. And if you're not as aggressive, maybe just put a cute little welcome mat that tells people you don't like company. So that is the right of possession, is to have it, to be there yourself, and to have others not be there if you choose uh, to not have others there. And our last right is the right of exclusion and control. This means the right to exercise control over the property. Now it's a little bit different than the right of possession, right? So the right of possession, you had the right to be on the property and to keep others away. to put up your fence and to have the property all to yourself. The right of exclusion and control is a little bit different. What we're talking about here is basically discrimination. You can discriminate on the use of your property, who gets to use it and how it's used and things like that. So think about this in more along the lines of selling and renting property. So for most of history and ownership of property, you could discriminate willingly if you wanted to against race, you know uh, creed, religion, you know uh, sexual orientation, age, just about whatever reason you want to discriminate, you could pretty much do it. But now we have uh, fair housing laws and things like that that say you can't discriminate against people. So if you own an apartment complex, you have to rent to people in wheelchairs and put in ramps and widen the doorways. You can't discriminate and say, well, I don't want to, as an owner, make all these improvements. And so I'm just not going to rent to folks in wheelchairs, right? So you can't discriminate now. So this right of exclusion and control has been, eroded away over the last, 100 years, but you still have some rights of exclusion and control, but it's really has to do with being able to control the use and the type of use and the people and the that come onto the property and use the property, or that you want to sell the property to, right? You can't only choose to sell to one group and not another group of people. Um, so that's what we're talking about with the right of exclusion and control. All right, so things to take away are just know the bundle of rights and the different rights you have in property, and look forward to more chapter 1.